Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady checking in with a weekly garden tour. Now I'm making today's tour a day early because we are going to have an ice storm all day tomorrow, which creates utter chaos for us here in central North Carolina Zone 7. So this morning I've been out harvesting some things in preparation of staying inside all day tomorrow. So let's go walk around the garden so I can show you how everything looks after a week of consistently cool winter temperatures. We can start right here, sort of front yard adjacent in this border where I had direct seeded lettuce to kind of fill in the open spaces. Along the front of this border, you can see the garlic is growing up in front of it. That helps prevent the animals like deer and rabbits from nibbling. And I've been out harvesting from this patch actually for several weeks now, really delicious salad greens. You can see it's totally rebounded from last week's sudden temperature drop from 80 to 20. And I know it'll be fine tomorrow after we get some snow and ice. I think in general, people don't always give plants the credit they deserve for their capacity to deal with winter temperatures, especially plants here in Zone 7 in the southeast, where we really can grow 12 months out of the year. So in the back of the bed, behind all that lettuce, a lot of larkspur and a great stand of poppies. Of course, I've been in here weeding. There's lots of veronica to pull out. This is not the type of veronica that you would buy. Same thing, the lamium that I talk about, that is a weedy winter active lamium. Of course, I see vetch because there's nowhere in my yard that doesn't have vetch. And I'm really pleased to see cilantro. I'm probably gonna harvest some of that and just use it for a meal tonight. I think all of this stuff will be totally fine. Actually, snow and ice is good because it's an insulator. It's much better to have that precipitation covering the plants than nothing and, you know, cold temperatures and a lot of wind. So overall, I'm not worried at all about the plants with tomorrow's weather. I'm more concerned about losing power and people being out trying to drive when they shouldn't be. Here we have Prunus mume bridal veil, and this you can see has gotten nipped a bit. You can kind of see some of the brown, but overall it's just generally slowed down, which is great because I'd love to be able to enjoy this for more than just a few days. And I can't wait to see what this looks like coated in ice. It'll be quite pretty. Wonderful flowering apricot with this weeping form. The wave as a whole doesn't look like much, but I know it will. In a few months, it'll be really impressive. So, sort of an exercise in patience. I planted, I seeded a bunch of stuff, and I don't see any of that germinating yet. It's been quite cold since I did that sowing, so I expect everything that I did on the last few days of the warm weather is going to be significantly slower compared to the stuff that I did like in mid-December, and then we had like 3 weeks of really warm weather. But you can see the barley is doing great, and there's tons of poppies germinating. That's what all of these are, and there's self-sown larkspur coming up. So I definitely am noticing a lot of animal browse here. The animals are definitely eating the barley. So after tomorrow, because we're getting precipitation, but after tomorrow I'm going to come out and spray I Must Garden deer repellent. I've been seeing 3 deer, I think they're a family, basically hanging out in my yard. And I don't blame them. I would want to live here too. There's a lot of food. So I Must Garden at this stage is the easiest way to redirect those animals and, maybe make it so that they nibble on some stuff in the native woodland out back instead of eating my barley. Now I try to be really strategic about how I go about dealing with animals, And in this case, you know, I have the barley planted intentionally with a mix of larkspur and poppies. And that's so that long term, the larkspur and poppies will help deter deer, rabbits, and groundhogs. However, at this stage, because they're just tiny seedlings, they don't really, you know, they're not really that effective. So that's why deer spray gets utilized now. Now, I have a 4-session webinar all about this topic, how to keep animals out of your garden, on a new platform that I'm going to post a link to in the description of today's tour. And I would love for you all to tune into that, especially if you have a lot of animal issues. This is like 20 plus years of experience trying to manage animals in sort of the easiest, most practical way possible. And I hope it's a great 4-session webinar that will give you some creative ideas. So be sure to click on that link. Well, I love when I go to the mailbox and I have beautiful seed catalogs, and Harris Seed is one that I've been ordering from for many years and highly recommend their vegetable and flower seeds. Can't wait to dive into this. I'll wait until tomorrow. Tomorrow's gonna be kind of a long, boring day. Now I wanted to pan from my current garden over to the blank slate. This week, Snell tree experts came and they removed all of the trees that were in the front garden here. Nothing valuable. You know, a river birch that was planted in the highest, driest spot of the yard. I wish that they would have planted that in the backyard where it would stay in the perfect condition, but of course they didn't. There was a stupid Bradford pear. There was a dying red maple. There was a liquid ambar or a sweet gum that had self-sown within feet of the house over there. So I'm really excited to see this as a blank slate. It's starting to feel more and more real. We actually have been notified by Lowe's that the kitchen cabinets might come in the first week of February. And that is great because once the house is done, then I will really get started on getting these gardens built. So they did stump grind all of these and just some kind of funny mounds. And really important to note, you can't plant directly in this because this is fresh wood chips and they will rob all of the nitrogen. So it's important to let that sit, and ideally you'd actually give it like 9 or 10 months. I'll be adding a ton of organic matter to these beds, and knowing anywhere where there was a tree stump, I'm gonna have to add a lot of extra fertilizer for the initial plantings. Fresh tree clippings or fresh mulched bark is actually not an asset for your garden. You're much better to get aged bark to use as mulch, but I prefer leaves. This bed does have a little bit of triple shred hardwood, as you can see, a very light layer, but in general I just let the leaves decompose in place, and that's really what makes the soil so wonderful. As you can see where the kitten is rolling, our ground here is all sand. She's definitely having fun. I think she likes cold weather. But you see, it's all sand. There's no organic matter in here. As deep as you dig, it's sand as far down as you go, and that's where Soil Cube comes into play. This is really the reason that my gardens are so successful. I simply cannot say enough about Soil Cube. And right now they're offering $30 off each big yellow bag. So I've put that link in the description as well. Definitely check that out. It's a great savings. It's the biggest sale they've ever offered. So removing trees is one thing, but I'm really excited about what they were able to do to clean up this water oak. Now this is like a squirrel planted native tree, and water oaks can sort of be notoriously challenging in a landscape. They do have a lot of surface roots, and this one had a lot of low branches that were you know, definitely kind of in the way, especially if we ever had box trucks come into the driveway. So Snell tree experts just came and they just limbed it up and cleaned it out, and it looks so good now. I'm so impressed with all that they have been able to accomplish, and I highly recommend them if you live in the Triangle, North Carolina area. I can't help it. The kitten's just being playful and cute. And she wanted me to show you all the money plant that has self-sown in this bed. That is Lunaria. And Lunaria is a biennial, so it won't probably flower this year. But it will be beautiful next year, like 23, spring of 23. And of course, Lunaria has those awesome dried seed heads that most people recognize. Now behind that, the Jasminum nudiflorum, it has also slowed down considerably, but it sure is so pretty. It's just like, you know, sunshiny and pretty and welcoming. And this is the normal time for it to flower. This is not unusual at all. As we walk into the backyard, you can see the mustard is such a reliable, tolerant plant. It's definitely, this is Ms. America, and I highly recommend it. That dark burgundy looks so good. It's great as a foliage element and cut arrangements to have inside your house. The broccoli is looking a little beat down, but I'm leaving it. And the cabbage has definitely suffered some. You can see they don't look great. A few of these look all right. They're not really ready to harvest, but I am not going to do any covering. And let me explain a little bit more about my philosophy on that. So I always get asked the question about covering plants and, you know, what to do when temperatures, you know, go from really warm to really cold, or when we have, you know, ice and snow predicted. And my philosophy is actually just really hands off. And I say this because I used to cover everything. I mean, it looked like I had, you know, ghosts all over my garden all winter long. I was doing that up to about 8 years ago. And over the years, I've just realized that covering doesn't actually always help that much. And in the case of winter precipitation, it actually causes more damage, because say you put a sheet over this and then tomorrow we get, you know, snow that then turns into ice, that will actually just crush the plants. And realistically, winter precipitation is actually an insulator, so it's to your benefit just to leave your plants uncovered. Now, yeah, there's no questioning. These plants have definitely suffered as a result of being so warm over the holidays, and then we, you know, suddenly got to 20 degrees, and, you know, they were tender in their growth and development, and that sudden cold did a lot of damage. And sure, I could have covered them, but the bottom line is you're better off just to have your plants get acclimated to the realistic temperatures that you're gardening in. And, you know, if you lose some because of, you know, temperature fluctuation, that's, to me, that's just part of being a gardener and understanding. And maybe you focus on growing these in a better, warmer microclimate. I'm actually pretty impressed with these broccolis. Though the foliage looks terrible. You see, it's sort of white and gross. The broccoli heads themselves are actually still really quite healthy, and I'm just gonna leave them. And again, this is just my approach to being kind of a lazy gardener in the sense that micromanaging temperatures isn't something you're really gonna be successful with. So you might as well just take a step back and let nature take its course, and hopefully you can learn from it. I know this year has been really confusing because I planted broccolis and stuff way back in like September thinking I would have harvest in November. And, you know, here I was just like, I don't know, 10 days ago out harvesting all my broccoli for the first time this season. Every year is gonna be different, but my advice to you for winter gardening is to not go to any great length. In my experience, covering your plants in the middle of January isn't really the best use of your time. Now, it's totally different when, say, you have a late frost predicted, and in the spring everything is growing, and maybe you've already bought tender plants for the growing season. That is a totally different scenario, and I do go to extremes to make sure that like a mid-April frost doesn't destroy my garden. But in the middle of January, this actually is kind of to be expected. So my advice is just to chill out and leave the sheets on your bed. No point in bringing them outside to cover all your plants up. Here we have witch hazel, Arnold Promise, and before the cold snap it was starting to initiate flowers, and so I'm really happy that this is slowed down. This is actually a piece of Seminole pumpkin that is still left on there. Also one of my favorite spring plants is Coralopsis. That's planted right here underneath, and you can see the buds were really starting to develop. And again, I'm really quite relieved that we have gotten some cold weather just to make everything pause. I don't like it when everything blooms out in January and then there's nothing to look forward to in February and March. So this is actually a good sign. Same thing goes for the camellias. Way fewer camellias now than there were 2 weeks ago, and that's definitely because of the colder weather. You can see Crimson Candles it's definitely ahead of schedule, but kind of pausing. No open flowers yet, which is a good thing. And the Edgeworthias, I think once the Edgeworthias get started, they just kind of keep on going. And this is definitely, ahead of schedule. Super fragrant and wonderful. I've been enjoying these in floating arrangements and in arrangements inside the house, and it'll be fine. These are really tough, and often deciduous plants have better capacity to deal with sudden cold snaps compared to broadleaf evergreens like camellias. They're a bit more sensitive. So overall, yeah, the Edgeworthias are early, but there's literally nothing you can do about it. So just enjoy them. Of course, this Edgeworthia that's rooted in its container is always way advanced, and that's partly because, this is a super microclimate with this black metal building. You see all these wonderfully fragrant flowers. It's really such a joy. I'm gonna make some new floating arrangements today, and I'm gonna fill them up with Edgeworthias. And in my 100-gallon root pouches, you can see the broccoli definitely was damaged by that cold. But I'm really excited to show you here is a cork oak. I brought these acorns home from Portugal, and they have been growing now for several years. And you can see this one really has a nice big trunk. And I am gonna get this planted in the ground on the next door property. That'll probably be the first tree that I plant. I'm really excited to have that. So there's not much to report here from this grow bag experiment with poppies and potatoes. I did get a lot of questions about the timing for planting potatoes, and my philosophy is really quite simple. Here in Zone 7, potatoes are perennial, and if I plant them outside now, they will just very slowly grow until the soil temperature is appropriate, and then they initiate proper development. I've been growing potatoes for like almost my entire life. They're a really easy crop. If you've no experience with it, check out my How to Grow Potatoes playlist. Hopefully you'll get some inspiration from the videos that I've made over the years. And don't be afraid to experiment. Now remember, I'm in a warm Zone 7, and what I do here might not apply to everywhere across this world. So always, look for local information that would give you the best advice for where you garden specifically. You know, what I do here in Central North Carolina is not necessarily going to be what you do in Minneapolis. So take my advice as inspiration and then always follow up with specific planting guidelines for where you live. As we round this corner, you'll see some daikon radish. These are all self-sown. I posted about daikon radish this week on Instagram, and a lot of people were interested, which is great. Again, daikon radish are something that grow pretty much 12 months out of the year here in Zone 7. So, you know, don't be afraid to try sowing some seed and growing it for yourself. The foliage is delicious, the root is delicious. More importantly, it's a great cover crop. You see there's some daikon. If you allow them to grow like I do and flower, they will self-sow. So if you don't want that to happen, just harvest them before they initiate flowers. That's the easiest way to control the spread. Here we have Camellia brie, a bit frost-nipped, but still blooming. And, oh, I see, I'm gonna have to come in and cut some hellebore foliage. I said I didn't have any hellebores blooming, but it looks like I was wrong. Looky here. If you can't tell, it's really cold. My hand that is not in a glove is frozen solid. So I'll probably wait to cut that foliage down until it's a warmer day and more pleasant. Also have to trim back this fern that sort of collapses. And you can see the Distilleum is starting to show out its flowers, and this is one of my favorites to use in cut arrangements in the winter. I really love these kind of burgundy flowers. You know, Distilleum was something that Dr. Durr really championed, and I have a number of varieties. I don't prune them into little boxes. You know, I really appreciate that this hides my air conditioning unit from sight. And I really do appreciate that it's a winter bloomer and long-lasting in cut flower arrangements. So you might not think of Distilleum as a plant for that purpose, but I'm telling you, it's awesome. So we come across here, Camellia October Affair. Definitely got tricked by the warm weather, and the flower buds are they're a bit frosted. A lot of these didn't open. And I imagine they probably won't at this stage. And you know, there are a lot of casualties from this kind of fluctuating climate. But one plant that I have to show you that looks great is this winter honeysuckle. You can see it straight ahead in full flower. And I just wish there was smell-o-vision so that I can give you a whiff of this, because it is magnificent. Now, Lonicera, this is Lonicera purpussii, winter beauty. This is actually a hybrid species. Winter blooming honeysuckle does have a bad rap because it can be somewhat invasive. Often birds will eat the berries, and then that's actually how it's distributed in mass. And it can have a suckering habit. As you could tell from this plant, I do some really hard pruning on it. I have, you know, big branches that I trim down, and I tend to do basically reduction pruning, where I cut at least a third or maybe 2/3 of the plant out every 4 or 5 years, and that's how I can maintain it in a really nice way, and it's never been invasive for me. The fragrance is truly magnificent, even on a cold day. Oh gosh, it smells so good. I sure wish that I could send this through the YouTube video, because it's the kind of scent that it just makes you really appreciate the season. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's garden tour. I'll definitely add some footage tomorrow morning as the winter precipitation arrives. And I hope that you all will stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, have a fantastic week. And I appreciate so much that you tune into these videos. And I look forward to sharing more updates next week. Take care, everybody.